Good day everyone and welcome to my Magicka Necromancer build, well, two builds for the High Isle patch. Magicka Necromancer right now is a very strong class and that's why I'm enjoying it a lot as well, and I wanted to make a video to show the builds that I'm using. I have two builds, one is a 1 bar build and one is a 2 bar build. The first is with Oaken Soul, of course. The first really emphasizes the benefit of Magcro in the sense that you have a crazy amount of survivability by just using 2 skills, and your damage burst combo is also only a very limited amount of skills. But for those that find Oaken Soul too overpowered or don't want to play with 1 bar or whatever, I've also included a 2 bar build, just a classic kind of Magcro build that also works well in PvP. There's gameplay at the end of the video, and there is also a written version of this build that you can find in the description or when you follow the link on the top of the screen. So let me get into the build. For starters, the 1 bar build. Here are the stats for that build. As you can see, I put most points into health. This is simply because it helps a lot with survivability to have a large health pool, and having extra maximum magicka doesn't really help that much when it comes to damage. You can divide the points into health, magicka and stamina as you like, depends maybe on your other glyphs and all that, to the point where you have about 16k stamina, at least more than 20k magicka, and then you can pump everything else into health if you want. Everything else, these are of course buffed stats because it's with Oaken Soul, but as you can see, fell damage is alright in combination with this maximum magicka, but you will see in this build that I have a lot of burst, well, pressure coming from the set itself as well. Sustain is perfectly fine. Magicka Necromancer is super easy to sustain, so you don't need to worry too much about that as well. As for the race, you can go for High Elf, Breton, Dark Elf, but I'm gonna be honest, it's Magicka Necromancer, you can use any race you want. And then for the resistances, Oaken Soul is going to give you major protection, of course, which is a good amount of resistance on top of this. However, you could consider it squishy, after all, not even reaching 20k. And if you want more in terms of resistances, you can make up for that with the sets or with the CP. I will talk about that. Personally, I'm going a little bit glass cannon with this, simply because Magicka Necromancer just has so much crazy healing that I like to pump everything else to damage and pressure, but I will show you ways on how to make it tankier as well, if you wish to do that. For the food, I have smoked bear horns as always, the Mundus is the Atronach, and Vampire Stage 3 also as always. Now the sets in this 1 bar build, I have 5 pieces of Serpent's Disdain in combination with 2 pieces of Magma Incarnate, 2 pieces of Trainee, and then of course the Oaken Soul Ring and Master's Perfected Maces. Now I will start with the 5-piece set here, Serpent's Disdain. You have a lot of options here. Basically, Serpent's Disdain is something that I use because of how much pressure it gives. Of course, if you are constantly spamming your attacks and your spam ball on the enemy, you will have a good uptime on status effects regardless, but that's not really what you're doing, especially not in 1vx. And I like Serpent's Disdain because of how easily it spreads a lot of pressure across all the enemies that I'm fighting for a long duration as well, and this really in turn gives me a lot of defense too, because people are always getting pressure, so they have to every now and then cast a defensive skill as well, and in general it will also damage Nightblades through Cloak, for example, and it will just add a lot of pressure in general to all the enemies that you are fighting. That's why I like this set, but there are other options. For instance, Aldous Wrath is decent, Zorgvin's is decent as well. These are both crit damage sets, and that way you can focus a lot on big bursts with your Blast Bones and your Dawnbreaker, if it crits, that is. Acuity is another good option. In that case I would definitely also want to go with dual wield axes rather than maces, but here I'm a bit more focusing on long-term pressure on top of decent burst rather than just purely burst. In any case, whatever you go with, it should work because Magicka Necromancer is super easy to play and super effective at it as well. A defensive set that you can slot here is the Trial by Fire set. I think I have some pieces of it. Yeah, here you can see one. This is going to give you a lot of armor, and the uptime on this is going to be really high as well, especially 1vx or outnumbered, because many people are starting to run charged. Some people will also have Serpent's Disdain, the set I just mentioned, because it is just effective to run with status effects, but this also means that you will have a lot of status effects on you just about all the time, and using this set you can really have a benefit from that by gaining a lot of armor from this all the time. So if you want to have a defensive set that gives you a bunch more armor, as I mentioned in the start, to not really go full glass cannon, even though Magicka Necromancer never really is glass cannon, it just has a lot of damage and a lot of healing always. then this is an option, this set is an option. For the traits and for the enchants, full triglyph enchants on the armor, and then for the traits, reinforced on the chest and impenetrable on the other pieces. I'm running 5 medium, 1 light and 1 heavy, and then on the jewelry is 3 infused spell damage. On the weapons, as I said, maces are good, axes are also good, but for the traits in any case I would go non-honed and charged, even if you are going with more of a crit build rather than one with that where you also focus a lot on status effects. Charge is still the best option because of how easily it is to proc a lot of beneficial effects that give you more damage against your enemy. The enchant I'm using here is shock and poison. This in combination with the physical damage and the bleed damage from the skill from this that is yet to use with this set, and also from the light attacks. This is going to proc a lot of stats effects on your enemies. You also have flame damage from blast bones, and if you get a long duration on the stats effects, on this many stats effects, you have a lot of pressure taken on the enemy all the time, which is, I think, very beneficial to have. That brings me to the skills. Very simple. You have 2 healing skills, Intensive Mender and Resistance Flash, and the healing from this is absolutely insane. Like, I have no idea why this is in the game, but honestly I enjoy playing it, so whatever, I guess. And then your damage skills, there's 3 of them. There's your ultimate, Dawnbreaker, and then Stalking Blast Bones and Rending Slashes. You can go for the other morph of Rending Slashes as well, in case you want to have a bit more healing. If you apply that on multiple enemies, it can be nice like that as well. And then the last skill here, this is a bit of an utility skill. I have Elude, because it's also a very dense skill in how much it gives you. It gives you Major Evasion, which is a super strong buff, and it also gives you Major Expedition. So this is a you get a lot basically out of the utility from this skill, but you can also run other things. If you're going for a crit build, you can, for example, try to go with Race Against Time, and this way get more critical damage, or any other skill, for example Caltrops, if you want to have some extra penetration, might also fit here. Now, speaking of penetration, this is quite alright, because in the champion points you have Force of Nature. All these stats effects that I have on the enemy, it's also going to give me a lot of extra penetration against the enemy, and that's why, even though on the character sheet it might seem like my penetration is a bit low, it does get boosted quite a bit by this champion point, which synergizes very well with stats effects. The other CP that I have are Focus Mending, Biting Aura and Ironclad, and then Celerity, Sustained by Suffering, Pain's Refuge and Survival Instincts. Again, Survival Instincts is going to play really nicely into the amount of stats effects that are going around right now. So that's it for this 1-bar build, and then quickly for the changes for a dual wield, well, no, double bar build. That's what you see over here. The basic layout of this build is very similar, and in the end, when you count in the extra benefits you get from the extra skills and the extra set on a double bar build, it comes out really similar to a 1-bar build, and that's why I actually think that these builds are super similar to each other, and you can use either one of them and you'll have a similar result. Anyway, for this 2-bar build on the back bar, I will now use Rallying Cry with an Ice Staff in defending. A very good back bar set, especially with the amount of critical damage that's going around right now, partly because of Oaken Soul, of course. And then I keep the Master's Perfected Dual Wield on the front bar, and I have the Marken Mythic instead of the Oaken Soul Mythic. Rallying Cry rings, and then on the 5-piece set, you can have the same 5-piece sets as I was talking about earlier. Here, for convenience, I've just slotted all the Scarf to showcase it as well. You want to go with Triglyphs as much as you can. Again, the traits again all impenetrable, except for the chest, which should be reinforced. And then a monster set, I'm now simply using 1-piece Magma Incarnate instead of 2. For the skills on the 2-bar build, also again actually a very similar setup. I will be using Blast Bones, Rending Slashes and Dawnbreaker still, but now I have Razor Caltrops and Degeneration on top of that. Degeneration is going to give me the spell damage buff, which means that I can use immovability potions, but on top of that it also adds some extra pressure on top of what Rending Slashes is going to do with the Master Dual Wield and the status effects if you choose to build into that with, for example, Serpent's Disdain. And then Caltrops is going to give you the penetration on top of the Force of Nature CP, which is super nice to have. You will have high pen with this build. On the back bar, Race Against Time for mobility in conjunction with Elude, but also for the critical damage. The 2 base healing skills being Resistant Flesh and Intensive Mender. Mortal Coil, which is going to give you yet another heal over time, but on top of that will now give you some very nice sustain as well, and some extra healing done. And then Beckoning Armor, which is going to be your armor buff. The range spill is also quite useful against ranged enemies, because now there's often some people that like to sit at range and deal a lot of damage to you that way. This will pull them in and bring them in nearly range where you can start attacking them as well. And then Undo is the back bar ultimate, not really for using. Dawnbreaker is always the main ultimate you use, but simply for the minor protection. Anyway, that's it for this, these two builds. I have some gameplay now, and you can also find everything written down on the website. I hope if you choose to play Magicka Necromancer as well, that you will enjoy it as much as I did, and have a good one. See you in the next video. Bye.